Did you see the list of people that's supposed to be attending?
Yes, yes, I did.
Where? Where's your bag? Oh,
Well, okay.
the problem is that my list is on my computer and I can't connect to it.
Oh.
But I actually just need to send this out to other people as well.
Are you okay?
So I'm actually, I don't know because I don't know how to send um,
The live event thing.
I need to send them I need to log into Conversion to send them this evening because they can do it until 5 o'clock. You have to try and connect to my phone. Where's Michelle? Maybe ask Michelle if she can quickly help me to connect this. Oh, wait, if it, oh, sorry.
Need to put little sponge things at the bottom. No, that they put under the chairs. Because this is a very smooth surface. You'll know for next time. You'll wing it, don't worry. You'll wing it.
I just want to go. I need to send the link to just on top so that I can actually get in.
Now you need to move this table here. Like so.
Okay.
Let's do that. For you.
What do you guys do? I'll start with you. Orange is Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay. Oh, you didn't need it. When I said you natural. Very refined. Yeah.
Are you serious? It is in the same brain.
No, please. It's fine. Every time someone tries to help me tonight, stuff stalls. So don't stress. Let me just stop here. It's fine. I just need to get closer to the screen so that the people can see. Okay? No, not at all. We're moving. Yes. No, no, you won't be in the shot. We're moving. We have to. They say they can't say they see anything, so we have to be closer. And we're already running late. Very late.
Yeah. Do you want to cut the FMB feature out?
No.
Okay. Remember half the stuff that's on me. Where? I'm reading. Like this.
Yeah, local.
I know you're not really recognized.
I need some people that look, if you see.
Yes.
It's so. You look understand now. I'm so sorry.
But now we know.
People in the back. Okay. Sorry, I'm checking the videos. Ah, okay, okay. Did you go through to, okay. That's so nice. The audio. Now just look on the inside.
You can look on the inside as well.
Welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're all here to share tonight. This is our first post-COVID hybrid event for female courses. So this is a very exciting day for us. We're going to start off just with the official welcome about what is Future Female and also what does it mean for Port Elizabeth specifically. So we're going to start off with the video. Just excuse me, I just need to start the video from my laptop.
Future Females is a movement to increase the number of and success of
Female entrepreneurs.
And entrepreneurs.
female entrepreneurs received just 2.5% of VC funding globally in 2016. But female-led companies delivered 63% better returns than male-led only. Globally, women own just 1% of the world's wealth. To drive change through technology, creativity, and entrepreneurship, we cannot have just 50% of the world focused on it or involved in the conversation.
Future Females provides a space, physically, emotionally, and digitally, where women can be empowered and supported to create, to fail, and to win.
At Future Females, we are pro-women, not anti-men, and we're looking to engage with all types of forward-thinking humans. Future Female stands for collaboration,
Inclusive,
Community driven.
youth first,
Okay, so that was the first video that Future Females created 3 years ago. And Future Females for Elizabeth is 2 years old this year. I'm just being asked by the FNB building staff community that we all have to wear our masks at all times, unless you are speaking as one of the speakers or with a microphone. It's just due to the COVID protocols. So we're going to move along to Future Females for Elizabeth. I'm just going to take you through our values. So our community operates in line with our 5 key values. We are collaborative, we are inclusive, we are community driven, we give you what you want, We take action and also give first. So we also offer, our offering is focused on the following 4 pillars: on energy, which can be self-care, on time or productivity, relationships or your audience, relationships or your audience, and money or revenue. We also offer our featured female starters cover for the £9 per month, but if you sign up with our link and our discount code, you can get a 20% discount off for life, and that's for life every month. We also offer the Featured Females Business School, our online 3-month business accelerator, and you can also sign up for that. If you want more information, you're welcome to email me on kana@featuredfemales.com. Then we also just want to tell you a little bit more about our vision, which was actually explained in the video quite well, is that we are pro-women, but that does not mean that we are anti-men, so we are not feminists. We are here to bridge the gap and to increase the number of female startups and also increase their support. So that's why we're all here tonight. And then Featured Females for Elizabeth then lives up this mission in Port Elizabeth and actually in the Eastern Cape, because we are the only Featured Females chapter in the Eastern Cape at the moment. And we will probably be consolidated as Featured Females Eastern Cape if we don't get more chapters, which is very exciting because the Eastern Cape is the tourist of South Africa, and we really want to empower our economy, especially our female entrepreneurs. So now we're just going to do a quick shout out to our sponsor, FNB. It's been from Newton Park or Newton Place. We've got Michelle McGibney right here. She's one of our FNB business banking superwomen. We just want to thank her. She put all of this together. And then her right-hand lady, Stacey, here at the back. So big thanks to her as well. And then and other 2 ladies that helped us with the coffee. Yeah, we had a whole team to set all of this up, but you don't see that happens behind the scenes. So we just want to thank everybody for that. Now we're going to go on to the FNB feature, which will be handled by Michelle. Michelle, I'm going to give you the mic. I'm just going to sanitize it first, and I'm going to sanitize the clicky thing as well, and then you can continue.
Good evening, ladies. It's so wonderful to have you here with us this afternoon, this evening. So out of the feature, I thought we'd focus on a free feature that we have on our app that's called Fundaba. So Fundaba is actually just your in-your-pocket partner to entrepreneurial success. And it's just designed to give customers knowledge that they need so they can easily apply these lessons to their business. It's free on our app. The only costs involved are to use data for video and audio content. It's available in 5 languages, being Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, English, and Afrikaans. And it's got 12 modules that take you through the journey of Lebo, the banker who decides to start his own business. So the Fundaba app incorporates 4 stages, being incubate, run, start, and grow. And inside each of those stages, it covers various topics, which I've detailed on the slide there above. And it's a progressive thing that you start in the beginning and you work through the different modules. So it helps you focus on certain areas and something you may have overlooked in one of the stages, which you thought might possibly need to come later or whatever it is. So it's some really, really good content. And they've actually collaborated with about 100 of their own businesses that have put content available on where they've battled, what they needed support with, what they would like to have information on. And then this is just a little how to actually get this feature on your app, because it's not something that comes up on the launch screen. So on the banking app, when you get your launch screen, right at the bottom, there should be a little plus sign. And on the plus sign, it will then take you to a whole lot of other things like a customer screen where you can find the Fundaba app and a couple of other things as well. So then all you need to do is click on the Fundaba and it will be added then onto your launch screen. And once you're in there, you follow the registration process of the business journey. And it will ask you a little bit about yourself and your business, and then it launches you into the 4 stages of what is on offer in terms of learning content. Oh, me. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. All right, ladies, so let's get us into the interactive part of this evening with our wonderful panelists. Marika, can you please come sit on your chair? Okay, so we have our clinical psychologist, Brenda, who is sitting in the middle chair over there. Brenda's got a very, very detailed and interesting bio, specializes in all sorts of things. We've detailed them up there on the screen for you. Marika Lau, who is a medical doctor and does a little bit of anesthetics as well. And then we've got our craniosacral therapist, who is Linda Hayden. Thank you. Again, craniosacral therapist is never something I've heard of ever before. So one of your first questions that I'm going to ask you is, what is this all about? Okay, and that's me. So this evening we want to focus a lot on mind, body, and soul, and how the three all interact with one another. And we've obviously just been through this dreaded C word of COVID-19, which apparently is coming back with a bang. So we just wanted to explore a little bit, without making this a COVID event, just a little bit about the impact that it has had and how your mind impacts your body, that it impacts your soul, and what sort of things you can do and tricks and tips from our panel. So here we have a lady sitting stuck in a glass. Where to from here? So Brendan, I could ask you the first question. Just hang on a second. We got a second mic.
And I have to sanitize.
Okay. This is going to be very difficult.
Or speak loud, yes.
Okay.
I'm close
All right.
enough.
Okay, cool. So what I wanted to ask you, Brendan, you have told us that you do journey work. Could you possibly explain what journey work is and what it entails and how it can be of benefit to you?
Okay, so thank you, and thank you for having me here. Firstly, I'd like to say that I am a clinical psychologist, so I do all the traditional psychotherapeutic techniques within my scope of practice. One of the techniques that I've learned in say 2007 is journey work. It's a long story, so I'm going to be very brief. I don't know how much of time I have for that. So the journey is a technique that I learned from a lady called Brandon Bass, and she had a tumor that was the size of a basketball in her uterus. And I'd like you to read the book called The Journey. And I fell in love with the work because I was always fascinated with this whole body-mind concept. And I always knew that if there was an illness in the body, it was because of some emotional cause. And so when I met her, I did the whole practitioner's course with her. I was also always fascinated with the work of Deepak Chopra because he talks about cellular healing. And of course, I'm a fan of Louise Hay, and you can heal your body. So if you're familiar with that, you already know that that is my area of interest. So with the journey, it's there are two things, if I can be very brief, because I can spend the whole evening talking about the journey. I'm really passionate about it. I live and breathe the journey. With the journey, there's two things about it that's very important. The one is that it is cellular healing. That means that through the process, we access cellular memories, because everything that has happened to us is recorded or stuck in our bodies. So there's cellular memories and emotional memories. And through this process, we access those memories. And I'll tell you more about the technique later on, so I'm not going to go into that yet. And then when you face those memories and clear it out, you heal from that. And the other aspect about journey work is it is about spiritual awakening. So that is amazing, because when you get to become more awakened spiritually, you get in touch with that infinite intelligence that will give you all the answers, and it will help you with healing on any level.
Wow, awesome. Thank you. That was very, very interesting. Helen, this one for you. Could you please explain craniosacral therapy to us?
Yes, I just want to correct something before we get started. I'm not a qualified therapist yet, but I'm a practitioner. I'm on my way. COVID did halt things a little bit this year. To start off with, craniosacral therapy is very much to do with the alignment of the cranial bones from the spine to the sacrum. And when you're working with that and opening up the bone system, literally the brain has sutures, and you can release those sutures. You can actually release pressure off the brain, which has so many impacts on our nervous system, our metabolic system, our endocrine system. There's an endless list. And when you have the bones releasing, you can actually tap into the concapsuled membrane that's around the brain and down the spine, which we call the dural tube. And when you can tap into that when you're releasing the spine, the dural tube encapsulates the fluid which is created, the cerebral fluid, from the brain. It goes down the spine and it gets excreted by the time it gets to the sacrum. So when you tap into that, you know, the spine opens up, the nervous system gets space and opens up, so neural pathways can open up, and that's where reflex integration can take place, emotional trauma and releases can take place, such as PTSD. Learning disabilities can be assisted with the reintegration of reflexes. So yeah, I hope I'm giving clarity of what it's all about. Wow. It helps rehabilitation and it helps learning disabilities.
Can I just ask a question about that? Does that relate in any way to the vagus nerve? Because I know that Prema also spoke about the vagus nerve when we were talking about this event beforehand. And I know I think the vagus nerve also runs straight through your body, or how does it work?
Maybe that's a question for the doctor.
I feel like my work is very boring compared to it's so conventional. Yeah, no. So the vagus nerve is basically a nerve running directly from your brain down your spinal cord, not in your spinal cord, but in front of your spinal cord. And it forms part of your autonomic nervous system. So basically everything that happens in your body that you don't control necessarily, or you don't voluntarily do. So your breathing, your heartbeat, your blood pressure, your digestive system, the way your digestion works. And your vagus nerve basically has two branches, your sympathetic and parasympathetic. The one is excitatory and the one is fight and flight, and the other one shuts you down. So basically when you have overstimulation of the vagus nerve, that's why your heart rate would go up, your blood pressure would go up, your stomach feels like it's in a knot. So basically what these ladies are talking about and what they are referring to is just stimulating or what damage to these nerves. Well, a whole host of diseases can actually cause damage to this nerve or to this bundle of nerves. But there are so many ways, and I think it's very under researched and also very much under practice, especially in Western or in modern medicine. We tend to medical doctors or the medical field tends to want to see something on a scan or on a microscopy slide, or they want to see evidence of something before they actually use it. But I mean, there's so many studies that have proven that these techniques that these ladies talk about actually really, really, really work. And I wish I could live in a time where this is integrated into Western medicine a bit more. So it's basically just stimulation, and it's whatever we do and what we think this brain, this nervous system bundle of nerves run directly from your brain stem into your body. So there's a lot of research that has been done on how your thoughts and how your memories actually control your autonomic motor system, and it's fascinating. It's actually a little bit scary because half of that we do not control. like Prima also said, the little memories, I think they call it memes or the mema, or I'm not sure what they call it. And are you familiar with work of Dr. Caroline Leaf? Very, very big fan. But she speaks about our brain is a billion. I think there are two very well-read ladies on psychology there. She speaks about how the brain is a billion of little microscopic computers. And whatever we do, whether we notice it, I mean, our conscious mind is only 10% of our brain. The rest is unconscious. We don't even know we're storing memories, and we don't even know that we're busy making connections in our mind. And it's scary. It's very, very scary. And yeah, but that's a story for another day. But these small micro quantum computers are always, whether we're asleep, whether we're awake, busy storing and creating new information and saving data. And it has such an effect on our autonomic motor system. Anyway, I feel like I've totally over-explained that a little bit.
Okay, well, my next question is going to relate to all three of you, and maybe we can start with you, Marika, as often your GP is your first point of call when you feel like something's not quite right, and you then make your assessment and send it off to a clinical psychologist or to an alternative therapy that a lot of people don't know about. So what are you noticing with regards to the stats and the types of problems that people are presenting with now since the pandemic?
I think one of the most significant changes that I've noticed in the past 6 months, obviously there's a lot on the medical side, on the physical side, physiological side. We're not seeing as many of our chronic patients as we actually should. Patients are not following up, which is understandable because they're trying to keep their distance. So many of our chronic patients are being neglected in a sense, and we're sitting with a big backlog of surgeries that needed to be done, investigations that needed to be carried out that are not being done. We're picking up cancers that are a bit more advanced, that if you caught it 6 months ago, it could have been operable, that are now not operable anymore. So that's one side of the story, adds to the stress, adds to the tension, obviously. But one of the biggest things that I would say that has impacted me or that I've noticed is the rise in mental health complaints. Absolutely. The anxiety, the depression, suicide attempts, it is absolutely astonishing. And what I've found that's even more interesting is it's from patients that you almost not least expected, but not your typical psychiatric patient profile. Yeah. I mean, there's a middle-aged Afrikaner oom, breaking down and saying, I can't hear. And it's difficult because it's something that it's a strange time. And I mean, it's uncharted waters that we're in. We've never been here before. We don't have a previous pandemic that we can refer back to and say, this is what we should have done, or this is what we should do, and this is how we could better that. We don't have the answers, and I think the uncertainty is what causes most of this. The uncertainty about the future, people's finances, people's private and professional lives are just literally, there's so much uncertainty, and that causes a lot of, so yeah, I would definitely say the increase in mental health problems.
Okay, so Prima, over to you. Have you noticed the increase in people with mental health problems and, experiencing minor traumas, major traumas, anxiety, depression, suicide attempts? A little insight from your side?
Yeah, I just checked the stats because I thought this question would come up and I wouldn't have the answer because I'm not really into the stats. Because in the practice, obviously, we're seeing a lot of people with anxiety disorders, panic attacks, and maybe later on we can talk about panic attacks because that's a major problem at the moment. The South African Anxiety and Depression Group surveyed, and they found that 65% had heightened stress challenges now during COVID. And the main stress factors there are two factors. One is loss of income, and the other one was loss of a loved one. So we can see that it's impacted people, and people are really not coping. And the other thing that was noticed is that suicide rates were much higher. And I don't even think that this information is correct because it says that 23 recorded suicides a day, 20 attempted suicides. And I mean, we're seeing quite a lot in our hospital alone, so I'm sure there's a lot more that's not being recorded. The other thing, other problem is that there was in July in South Africa. In the homes has been for a lot of families. Yeah, so that's the stats. We're seeing a lot of grief, a lot of complicated grief. So a lot of anxiety because, you know, anxiety is contagious. So what happens is that this prefrontal lobe is not really quite prepared for this because it doesn't know how to make sense of this that is so uncertain. Nobody knows. I think other illnesses, you know exactly you're going to go for that particular therapy and that is going to be the outcome. But with this, there's a lot of uncertainty. So when somebody tells you something that's scary, it scares you. And this prefrontal brain, it's like, if you say something scary to me, it's like you sneeze a germ on my
Mass
brain
hysteria.
and I go crazy. And so people are all getting crazy. Like at the moment we're saying the numbers are up, you know, and, you know, now we're all anxious again. And so people are having a lot of panic attacks and that's a serious problem. So that's what I'm seeing, a lot of that, yeah. A lot of violence, seeing a lot of violence. It's not just, you know, what we hear in the media, it is real. It is real.
I think I can just add to that the panic attacks in children and in young, especially with the schools that have been then it's lockdown, then they go back to school, but it's so impersonal. They don't really connect with their friends. It's these masks, it's this washing, especially the young kids. It's the first time I've seen panic attacks like that. It's the first time I've seen it and so frequently in a population that I would have never expected. And I mean, you don't want to medicate these kids because I mean, there's an actual stressor, there's an actual trigger to this. So you try to address it, but you also don't know what to say because it is scary. It's scary for everyone.
We're seeing suicidal behavior amongst children, which is unreal. I mean, many years I did research in suicidal behavior, and the youngest age was about 12. Now we're seeing children as young as 7 attempting and landing up in hospital. So it's quite sad, you know. Not all of it, those cases that I'm talking about hasn't been COVID related, you know. So children are under a lot of stress and also their parents have a lot of anxiety, so they pick that up.
And on a movement development, such as kinesiology, what also happens is we have found over the years that the movement of children have been restricted because of technology and all kinds of things, modern lifestyle. Now we have this confinement we're having in the world we are living in at the moment, and there's even more restriction. And so what's happening, the natural development of the child through movement and the learning through movement is being restricted anymore, even more. So that absolutely does add to what my two other speakers were talking about now as well. Yeah.
And are there any of the treatments and therapies that you may offer that can aid people in anxiety or panic attacks if you get that alignment right?
Oh yes, all the modalities are integrate. It's a physical therapy, so the touch is very important. And when you're doing a specific touch and specific stimulation on the body and integrating reflexes, you are releasing trauma that is stuck in connective tissue, which can be around organs, depends what the emotions are. So if you can release those areas, it does release emotional trauma as well. So it definitely assists. And because it's such a gentle but deep therapy, therefore you won't be spending 10 to 20 minutes with me, you'll be spending an hour, maybe more. Children less, of course. Adults most of the time longer. I find now with coming back working with the world we're living in at the moment with COVID and anxiety, I'm finding that my clients want to go over the time because they are more emotional related, which is stuck in the body. and the alignment, this tissue, the emotion gets stuck in the body. When you release the physical, it is a chain reaction to release the emotion.
Wow, awesome. Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah, Brenda, sure.
Can I say something about that? You know, when you say craniosacral therapy, I literally go weak in the knees because I've had many treatments and it's absolutely fantastic.
It's gentle.
It's so gentle. I don't want to, speak for you, but the touch is so gentle. And I don't like very intrusive work done on me. And it releases such a lot that I really benefited at a time when it was really necessary for me to have. And I will highly recommend it. Yeah.
And what really also assists when you're in a heightened state of PTSD or anxiety or depression, what happens is your protection mechanism in your body is constantly activated. So when you are going to rush any type of form of treatment or therapy, you might release certain areas, but you might overactivate the other areas. And that's where the touch is really, really important. That's why it's a soft and gentle touch. It's very, the attention is very much on releasing one area while still stabilizing the other areas, not releasing the one area and you're overactivating the other area, especially in the PTSD and anxiety and all the heightened states. So touch is very gentle, and that's why this therapy is so effective. It's deep and gentle. Yeah.
Maria, a bit of a random question for you. How important do you believe it is for complete and utter honesty and openness in consultation with your patients, from both their side and your side, and talking to them in the language that they understand, so that they can go home and actually think and understand about what treatment plan you've given them or diagnosis you've come about, but obviously you need the help from them. So how important is honesty?
I think it's an absolute make or break in anything. If you speak to a patient, and it's often very difficult. Prima and I just spoke about it now. When you have X amount of time, I always go over my time. I still struggle with that because you struggle to cut someone off when you're just getting through to them. But I think it's absolutely so valuable to have a patient open up to you. It doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't happen, but to ask honest questions. And my tactic or my technique of sort of getting that right is I tell them about my life. I tell them about my experiences and my shortcomings and the way I've struggled with this and with that and what I've tried. And immediately you find that common ground where I can sort of open up and I tell them how I messed up in the past, and this is what I've tried, and this is how I felt, and I understand what you're going through, and this and that. And immediately and what you can find out from a patient when they trust you and when they open up to you, it's like a whole different world that opens up. And often at times, I mean, many times, patients come to you with somatic complaints, physical complaints, and after a bit of inquiry, you realize that there's so much more beneath the surface, which is it's very upsetting most of the time, and it's quite taxing, but it's so rewarding to be able to connect with patients and find. I'm all about finding the root cause of things. We often have back spasms and neck spasms and stomach ulcers and palpitations, and it's one thing, I can give you a tablet for that. Obviously it's not rocket science, but something must be causing it. And I try to explain to my patients, for me, it's very important to have the patient invested in their own health and the patient understand what's going on with their body. I have so many patients coming to me with this bag of pills. They have no idea what's in it. They know this is heart and this is lungs and this is for my tummy and but they have no idea what the disease process is. They have no idea. They have no insight into their condition. And you can clearly see the difference in outcomes in a patient who takes authority over their condition and who takes authority over their life and their health. And it's it's so rewarding, and it's such a blessing to actually work with. I would go to the ends of the earth for these patients because it feels like you're getting somewhere, and it feels like something that I'm passionate about I'm able to help someone who's also who wants to. There's a big difference between a patient who just sits there and give me the tablets, I'll take them, I don't want to know, and someone who's actively involved in the process. And once again, that also comes from trust and from building a relationship with a patient. Yeah, sometimes it's easier than other times, but I must say it's of utmost important to me.
So ladies, when we go and see our GPs, there's nothing they've never heard or seen before. So honesty is definitely the best policy. So Prema, you spoke a little bit earlier about panic attacks. So what sort of mechanisms or techniques can one use to learn how to cope, to self-soothe, to get yourself from start to finish and pick yourself up again afterwards?
Okay, so can I just follow on what the doctor has said with regards to medication? I don't want you to get the wrong impression. When medication is needed, I will recommend it because often there's a chemical imbalance. We hear about that all the time. People have bipolar mood disorder. That's the most common one now. And they have, the doctor will say you have a chemical imbalance, so you need to take this medication. And when somebody is clinically depressed, then obviously they need to take the medication, and I will recommend that. But now, in addition, when it comes to journey work, and I suppose in other therapies as well, but I'm so into this now, what happens is that with medication, often all those emotions that you complain about, the anger, the fear, the guilt, the shame, all of those emotions get kept and stuck inside. And so when you take the medication, it almost forms like a nice thick little blankie here. So in therapy, what the aim is to remove the blanket, to go to the anger, to go to the fear, because anxiety is born out of fear, and to address those issues. So I'm not saying don't take the medication, and especially, don't wait until it gets to that point where you're not coping anymore. Some people wait until they're having a breakdown. Recognize, check in with your body, check what's happening. Because we're looking at body, mind, and soul or spirit. You need to check in what's really happening here so that you can address those issues,
Yeah, just what I would love to add to the doctor and to Prema is that, to follow up with what you're saying, is we live in societies where it's very acceptable to express our positive emotions, joy and happy and all that. When it gets to more negative emotions, the heavy emotions, it's not such an acceptable thing to express it. And we're actually not in a society where we are cultivating a culture to express the feeling. The idea is about feelings. It's a communication to you what's going on in your system holistically. And to release that emotion and not have it locked into your body and cause ailments, we need to cultivate something in our cultures, in our societies, where it's fine to express, but to teach what is the appropriate way to express negative emotions. One of the things I do suggest to my clients is when you're expressing, especially something like anger or frustration, get moving. Move, get into nature, get oxygen into your body so that emotion doesn't get stuck in your connective tissue and becomes a physical ailment. And that's what we need to cultivate. And to add to what I said before, for children, we need to keep our kids moving. And us as adults, we have to make time in our lives to move. Even if you're confined, like we are at times now with lockdown, get a routine in the morning, do stretches. I know some of the ladies here love their yoga. Do stretches, it releases that connective tissues. It opens up the spine. It's oxygen to the brain. And when you can get into nature, please go for walks. It's the best de-stressor.
So I remember hearing once that if you yourself or somebody that you're in company with is having a panic attack, that something as simple as counting, but not counting 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 7, 11, 4. Where you're actually distracting your brain away from the behavior and the activity that it's going through. It actually helps you cope. And another thing Carla mentioned to me that I think Prema may have taught her is the tapping method. Could you give us a little bit of a demonstration on how to tap ourselves back into calm?
Well, Carla's tapping a part of the body that I didn't teach her.
No, you taught me.
Yeah, there's so many different methods, you know. So there's some that I like using that, you know, is quite effective. Really, we need to talk about panic attacks later on, because we need to look at what really needs to be done. Because often people come and they have panic attacks. And yes, you can, I like to call it mind hacks, because with adults, you can do psychotherapy and they quite keen on that. You know, they like to be there for long and go over the time. But with younger people, if you say you're going to do a mind hack, they're quite keen on it because they're into this whole technology and the digital thingy. So when you teach them something, it's nice if they can have something that's really quick. Okay. So you want to talk about tapping? Okay. So panic attacks, always remember that it will pass. It's not going to last forever. It can last for about 4 or 5 minutes, but it can go on for longer. Okay. And I'm going to go to the tapping. Is that what you wanted to answer first, or how to work with a panic attack?
Well, let's work with a combination of the both. So
Okay,
the
let's
process
start.
of a panic attack and then something as simple as a tap on how to get you back to calm.
A panic attack is fear. Okay, we know anxiety is born out of fear. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If somebody comes to me now with panic attacks, and this is a real example, a real case. The guy comes to me and he has panic attacks because it's COVID. Okay, and he's anxious because he's going to get infected. And then with the history, I discover that his best friend's wife died. Okay, so he's scared. It's a real fear. Somebody's died. So obviously I'm a journey therapist, and with journey work, what we do with any emotion, remember, we work with emotion. So I prefer focusing more on the emotions than working on the cognitions, because the mind is going to make a lot of stories and run around in circles. So I prefer working with the emotions. I think the emotions are your gateway. It's your gateway to freedom. Because when you really get in touch with the emotions, you're going to release a lot. And of course, when you use the body has got a wisdom far more knowledgeable than this. So when you combine the two, and with journey work, it's a body, mind, and a spiritual technique. So it's an amazing process where if fear comes up, okay, that's what's happening now. I'm fearful. I'm going to get the virus, and you know, something bad is going to happen to me. I'm going to get sick. I'm going to die. Then what we do is we go back in time. So it's a regression therapy where we go back in time and we go to the earliest time that you've experienced that fear. Okay. So when you face that memory of the past, that young boy picks up on a memory. Okay. So the first memory was obviously his friend's wife that died. He was very scared and sad. But that wasn't the real issue. The real issue was that once before, he was caught in a schoolyard in a drum. They played a game. He was 6 years old. So that memory comes up. Remember, all the memories are stored in the body. So you'll have access to every memory in your body. So he picks up on that memory, and he was then captured in this drum, and obviously you're going to die. So panic attack for me is always a red light flashing. It's a near-death experience. Okay, so he has a fear of dying, but he's denying it because the adult mind cognitively saying, no, I'm not scared of dying. You know, how many times have we said it? I'm not scared of dying. Okay, I've said it, but I'm not ready to die. Okay, so when that little boy faces that memory of the past and he strengthens himself, that is in journey work, he strengthens himself. And the wonderful thing about the journey work is that he will come up with his own resources and he will strengthen himself and be strong for that time. And it is based on forgiveness. So he had to forgive the boys that actually put him in the drum every week and covered him where he thought he could die. Okay, so when you release that there, because once he was in the drum and I was able to use other techniques to release there and to allow him to breathe because he couldn't breathe. Remember, everything is about the breath. Okay, and I'll probably talk about that later. So when he forgave those boys, and obviously had to forgive himself because for his whole life, he was this weak boy. He could never fight off anything and he became this weakling. And still now he feels weak because now this virus is going to get him. Okay. So that is how I work with panic attacks. It's not just, you know, just tapping here, but the tapping we'll talk about just now. So somebody else can speak.
Okay, well, while still on the subject of panic attacks and things like that, Marika, if somebody walked into your room and explained to you that you were having a panic, that they were having a panic attacks and, you know, just not feeling themselves, would your first point of call be to give them tools to make them cope with that? Or would you recommend that they go and seek out alternative therapies to actually address the underlying issues?
Well, with panic attacks as such, obviously your first reaction is always to rule out that it's not indeed a heart attack, because they always think it's a heart attack or some or other, and often the time it is. So there's a whole process of just ruling out anything that might be causing it that is an actual physical complaint. And then with the panic attacks, you can usually get it on history. There's usually a triggering or an event that has caused it. And then one of the telltale signs of a panic attack is afterwards. If the patient comes in and they've had it at home or they've had it previously, they'll often tell you that they were extremely exhausted afterwards. That's one thing about a panic attack that you know that is different from anything else that causes hyperventilation and sweating and being all over the place, is they will tell you that it feels as if every little piece of energy is out of their body, because literally all your glands just secrete hormones and everything. You're just done. There's no adrenaline in your body left. So these patients will obviously, so the first step would be to ascertain that it is actually indeed a panic attack. And then, well, there's no use in talking to a patient about the underlying cause if they're busy hyperventilating and if they are all over the place. There's no point in that. These attacks can be quite severe, and it is very distressing for everyone involved. So to answer your question, yes, I would give medication. But as for the acute, I wouldn't be giving them a repeat script for 6 months, putting them on a chronic medication. I would give them a little Ativan under the tongue so that we can all just calm down. And then after they're settled and they feel comfortable and they are in a place where they are a little bit more stable, and then obviously you speak about it. You need to address it, especially if it's a recurrent thing, especially if it's something that has happened before. But no, not chronic medication, but definitely something in the moment to just abort the panic attack. Yes.
Because also, when you sit in your place of work and you suddenly freak out, you haven't got Rema on standby to teach you how to cope with this, so you need to take a pill. So, Linda, are there any techniques through your work that you could teach people that they could help themselves with, or little recommendations on how they could cope with how their body feels and reacts to something as severe as a panic attack?
Breath work, for sure. It doesn't matter what type of anxiety or depression or panic attack, breath work. What I find when someone do step into my office and there are signs of panic attacks, firstly, breath work before you ask any questions. I agree with the doctor. And then breath work just brings the person back to themselves, not in their minds anymore. just brings it back to themselves, and obviously physiological changes that happen. Brain gets more oxygen and all those things. And then obviously I'll be asking, are there any history of maybe heart attacks, that type of thing, because that's also very important for me to know, to work with a client. And then I would go into breath work. If you are someone that get into meditation, or I would teach them some kind of breath work that could just help them in that moment, get some clarity, to get some help.
Do you find that when people are panicking like that, and you suddenly go to, Linda told me to breathe, how do they remember how to breathe? Is there a little quick trick? I mean, I've heard of 4-7-8 breathing or 4-8-7 breathing, whatever it is. How do you encourage people to remember that sort of technique? And if it is 4-8-7 or 4-7-8, whatever it is,
yeah,
could you explain that to us a bit, please?
Okay, the first thing I do is to bring them back to themselves. I start breath work. While I'm speaking to the client, I start my own breath work, and subconsciously you start copying me. Then I request, would you mind if I ask you a few questions? And I'll call it this, coming back to myself, and I'll ask you 5 questions that combines your sensory. So I would ask you, name 5 items you see in your environment. I will ask him, what's the shades of the colors, or how do you feel like seeing that color? So the visual is activated. Then I'll ask them, what do they smell, or what can they touch in the immediate environment. That automatically brings them back to themselves, and subconsciously they start doing breath work with you. That keeps them out of the mind, brings them back to themselves in their bodies.
Oh, wow, that's very interesting. So following on from that, Kimberly, I'll give you this one. So do you think that it is important, again, nobody wants to talk about their negative mental health because we only encourage positive emotions. So if somebody has now started having panic attacks, do you think it's important for them to tell somebody that's close to them, that maybe works in close proximity to them, that this is something I suffer with? And if I do happen to start hyperventilating, these are the kind of things that you can encourage me to do.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, as was mentioned earlier, mental health or psychiatry as a field is still very much, we've come a long way, we've definitely come a long way, but there's a lot of stigma still around it, and there's a lot of, in many circles, it's still a little bit of taboo. So it's something that people will rather say that I'm a diabetic and I need to take my insulin, or I need to eat, or I need to do this and this and this and this. And society tends to have a lot of sympathy with these physical conditions or these chronic conditions. But when it comes to mental health, the sympathy sometimes leaves. And it's very, very, very sad, because it's these people that need it most. Not sympathy, I'm not saying sympathy, but empathy. Just these people who understand, and people who see the brain as also just another organ who can also suffer, because every other organ in your body is allowed to suffer, but heaven forbid if your brain suffers, because it's not seen, it's seen as weakness, or it's seen as the inability to cope, which is absolute nonsense. It will be so many, I think so many physical complaints, or not be solved, but will be improved if we acknowledge the power that our mind has on our bodies. And so yes, it's very, very important to have a support structure. Unfortunately, I see it every single day, especially, and I must say, especially in corporate. It's a very, very unforgiving world, very unforgiving. And you dare not show your weakness. You dare not show that you are suffering from this. And especially with something like this, it's not because you don't have a pen that you must give yourself an injection. You don't have a tablet for this or a tablet for, it's literally, I suffer with this and I have these certain triggers. It's important, and you can consider yourself extremely lucky if you have a confidant, or if you have someone working with you, especially a colleague in the workplace, that understands this and that knows how to. I mean, there's not much that you can do for someone if you don't understand the condition. If you don't understand, I mean, you had Linda close by, you could be breathing with her, but I mean, people who don't understand it, it seems strange.
And it adds to it adds injury to insult, absolutely.
It's just that, you know, if you haven't told anybody that you're going to have a panic attack and you suddenly freak out next to them, they freak out even more, then you freak out even more. And unfortunately, you're going to have to just put your pride in your pocket for 5 minutes and say to people, look, this is something I'm battling with. And I mean, I know I suffer from panic attacks. I've had to be carried out of this very room. It was very embarrassing. But again, we got through it. We're still here. And I'm standing in this room talking to a whole room full of people now. No panic. No panic.
And I just added her birthday today. Sorry, but just to add to what you said now, many people or most people who get frequent panic attacks, like with epilepsy, get an aura before the time. They get the feeling that they are going to, it's an impending panic attack. I think you feel it in your gut. Right? You feel it here.
My belly button feels
Oh, your belly button. Yeah, she could tell me, listen, my belly button feels funny and I can feel this coming on. This is, and then, I mean, she's practiced now already. She knows the drill, but I mean, many people will be able to tell you, I can feel this is, it's going to be a few minutes and then I'm going to completely lose it. And that actually helps when you get to know yourself and when your body collaborates.
Yeah, so like Prema was saying, you've got to go through like a regression journey and actually think back to where was my breath? How did my body feel? How did my mind react? And it's horrible to think about these things within yourself because you just think, I don't know, I don't remember. You actually do know. You just need to focus and think. So again, enough about me. Prema, you wanted to go back to panic attacks and breathing and maybe tapping.
Can I just say something about the breath? I've been watching this, he's a modern mystic and his name is, I think it's Thomas Hubble, and he talks about the breath. And he says we need to make friends with the breath because that is the first thing that we learned or we know. The moment we came into this world, that's the first thing you did. You started breathing. And if you follow the breath, it's been with us through all the developmental stages. So when you breathe, you will reconnect with any of the traumas that happened from any of those stages. So it's important for us to recognize that and connect with the breath. And, you know, we talk about, in Hinduism, we talk about pranayama yoga. And it's very important that, you know, initially I thought, you know, these things, I wonder if it really works. But when I started looking at the science behind it, then I realized, you know, things like when you do the yoga and the breathing, it actually stimulates the vagus nerve. And when the vagus nerve is sluggish or it doesn't work very well, you have all these symptoms, physical symptoms, you have depression and anxiety. And so now, without any of that skepticism, I actually do the work and I find that it is so beneficial. Okay.
Prema, can I perhaps add to that with the tapping? I think, I know I keep on going about the tapping, but for me specifically, and I know our viewers on Zoom can't see me right now, but especially after, no, not like this, I'm too sweaty. I'm just going to keep the mask on. For me, I think especially after a panic attack, because I also suffered from panic attacks. After a panic attack, for me, the tapping was more of a self-soothing, especially the tapping above the lip and below the lip, that kind of tapping. That's the tapping I'm talking about.
Self-soothing is very important because if you look at holistic health, one of the pillars will be self-soothing. You need to know how to soothe yourself. You need to know how to recognize when you're going to get it. Because with a panic attack, once you've had one, and most of the time we see people in their calm states. But once I did see a client having a panic attack in the hospital, and I was trying to calm her down, and everybody walked past me. And eventually the doctor came in, the physician, and he just stood there and he wrote and said, "Doctor, help me." And he says, he like, you know, asked me to just leave the ward. So I said, "Nobody's helping me." He says, "There's nothing you can do." Then I realized, okay, it needs to take its course. So what I suggest to, to clients is don't wait until it happens. Now you want to start 4-7-8 breathing, 4-4-6-4 breathing. There's so many numbers. Rather recognize what your triggers will be. And there will be triggers because it really catches you. Once you've had a panic attack, the fear and anxiety of getting it again brings it on.
Yeah.
And so it's important for you to recognize, what are the underlying reasons, work on those, and then recognize what are the cues so that you prevent that from happening. So there are lots of things besides the breathing, there's mantras, there's things that you can say. So it doesn't have to be an Eastern mantra. You could say something like, this too will pass. Breathing, exercise, relaxation. We like to teach a happy place, a safe place, things like that will, and we like to incorporate the whole, all the senses, because when you do that, it really slows the breath down. So the whole idea is to slow that breath down. And that 4-7-8 breathing is really very, very effective. Okay, so tapping will come later.
Well, Linda or Prem or Eureka, it doesn't really matter. I was on a mindfulness course not so long ago, and it was really, really awesome. And it makes you realize just how little you actually know about yourself and how much work you have to do. It's hard, but we do it, and it works. So that statistic turned around and said that it was again in a corporate company where they were going to do this mindfulness course, but the people that were participating in this mindfulness course had to go and have a blood test done to check their cortisol levels. Their cortisol levels were the equivalent of what the soldiers on the front line were in World War II. What is the impact on such low cortisol levels on your body?
Okay, well, cortisol levels are difficult to, you need a trend. So cortisol levels throughout the day, your cortisol levels works in waves. So you need to take early morning cortisol levels, because within 2 hours of waking up, your body, with its restoration during the night, if you've had good quality sleep, and if you've been in deep sleep for long enough, your cortisol levels rise, and by the end of the morning, or just before you wake up in the morning, they drop again. So it should be at its lowest when you wake up. The values differ. It's not really the point. But if your early morning cortisol levels are low, it means that you're technically adrenal. I don't know if you've heard about adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency, they like to call it. It's literally, if your cortisol is low in the early morning, it means that you're literally secreting. So cortisol is basically your stress hormone. The moment adrenaline gets secreted, cortisol will also get secreted. So it means that your cortisol levels have been high throughout the night and throughout the previous day. If you've gone through a very stressful time, you can expect your cortisol levels to be low. It looks like it's not, the stress hormone is low, so the stress is, but it's depleted. Your cortisol is literally depleted. The stores, the little glands, are depleted. So in effect, it means that your cortisol levels have been high for X amount of time, like for instance in war or during a stressful time. It basically, the effect of cortisol on the body is endless, and it's very underdiagnosed because it needs to be specifically tested for. It's not something that comes up to the forefront of your mind when you test someone for instance, chronic fatigue syndrome, or it needs to be specifically inquired about. And the symptoms are extremely vague, very, very vague. Fatigue, abdominal weight gain, inability to lose weight, cold or extremely warm body temperature, always hot or always cold, just lack of energy, depression and anxiety, hair loss, all those things that when you go through a stressful time. And the moment your cortisol levels rise, your immunity drops. That's why stress also causes a decrease in immunity, or decrease in your body's response to the outside world. And it's very, very interesting. I mean, it affects everything in your body at the end of the day. And there's very little, it's always funny when we do the test and you get the test back and you see that it's abnormal. You have this answer, but then the patient asks you, okay, but what now? What can you give me for this? but there's literally nothing you can give for it because it's a reaction. Your body is reacting to an amount of stress that is not good for you, not conducive to mental or physical health. So there's no quick fix for it, and that's always the most difficult thing to explain to a patient is that I can tell you it is like, but I could have told you this before the blood test as well, just from looking at the patient. But yeah, cortisol studies are extremely, there's actually a lot of studies done in the United States on it. It's not that big in South Africa, but because they're a little bit more in tune with.
We don't stress.
We don't stress in South Africa, we don't really stress in the States, but yeah, it's very, very interesting to see the effect that chronic stress has on your body. It's absolutely detrimental. And you can also immune disorders, basically disorders where your body attacks itself, where your body, the processes and the defense mechanisms that your body has in place to protect you from the outside world, your body turns that on itself. So your body starts fighting itself. Many, many diseases, I think more than 500 diseases. Rheumatoid arthritis is one of them, lupus is one of them, psoriasis, eczema, they're all autoimmune diseases. And that's one thing that I can add as well that I've seen, actually, I've seen a lot of in this time during COVID is a flare up in these autoimmune diseases. Absolutely, absolutely horrendous. Like the patients are literally just, these flares are, and nothing helps. You can cortisone them, you can give them, you can medicate them. It's literally, their disease process is so uncontrolled because of the stress level and because of this dip in immunity, and then your body just starts fighting itself because it doesn't know what else to fight.
Yeah, well, Carla, have there been any questions on our Zoom chat that you're aware of? Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask the panel a question? Stand up and ask a question.
I have a question regarding someone who has like bipolar disease. And it's really bad with taking the medication and then sometimes has these like insane sort of burst out episodes and goes and cries in the room and that sort of thing. I'm very like sensitive towards it because I've had like a history where for 6 months I had to be on medication because my levels were very low. But like, I want to know, how do you either get that person to understand that they need their medication, or what can you do to get her to just be happier and more balanced? Like, you know, because it's a terrible thing to go through and she doesn't understand what's going wrong in her body because no one's explaining this stuff to her. Everyone's just telling her to take her meds, but she doesn't have a clue what's happening inside. And like, I've tried to explain to her and I've told her my story over and over. And yeah, so what do you do in those sort of like situations? You know, like she's very healthy and active and all of that. So I just don't know what to do when an episode occurs and everybody's just like sort of tired of, and they don't care anymore, you know? So what do you do?
Maybe. Well, firstly, has she been formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder? So it's a
yes, as far as I know, and she's just not taking her meds. And as far as I know, she's 100% got bipolar. And yeah, so it's,
is she seen by a psychiatrist?
she was probably, but like she's not going regularly or anything like that.
Well, my rule of thumb with any psychiatric patient, like label, but any patient with psychiatric complaints, if you're not invested in the disease process and in the journey, then rather don't take any meds at all. Taking psychiatric or psychotropic medications on and off is actually much more damaging to the brain than just not taking it at all. When mania, well, in bipolar mood disorder, you have your manic episodes, or your hypomanic episodes, and you have your depressive episodes. If it becomes so bad that it starts impacting your social and your occupational, your professional functioning, I don't know if your friend is in denial or whether she just really doesn't have or doesn't see the problem with her actions. That makes it very, very big. The moment patients are in a corner where they can see I'm literally busy destroying my own environment and I'm busy destroying the relationships and busy destroying my career, that's usually the point where they where they change, but you can't do it for them.
But I think she's like past that point of spoiling those sort of relationships, because like I say, like nobody is in phase anymore. Just leave her, let her like spit it out and
They've accepted
It's
Rock bottom.
this, yeah. It's very, very difficult. It's extremely difficult. Yeah, it'll be better if I knew more about the situation. It's very, very interesting. Send it to me. Send it to me. I'd like to chat to her. I would love to chat to her. Anybody else in the audience that would like to ask a panel question? Yes, please go ahead.
Going to read my boss. I just want to ask, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs and so forth in this room. As you said in the beginning, we confronted the emotions that affects from hearing negative things such as COVID, etc. Would it be appropriate to say to our staff to be positive? Because you walk into your business and your staff talks about, did you hear that on the news? Did you hear this? Did you hear that? And it affects your psyche, it affects your work environment, it affects your staff, and it definitely brings something negative to the environment. Would you say psychologically it would be a positive thing to say to the staff, don't bring that in, keep that private, or discuss it in your own home, but in our work environment? Because in this time, we want to be uplifted. We want to hear positive things. We don't want to hear negative things. And obviously that plays a role in your work environment with your psyche as well. Would that be a bad thing?
I think everybody is quite stressed at the moment, and we all need some debriefing. So if you could be supportive in some way, maybe if you could work with them and find a way in which they could have some time, either during the week or in the day, where they could sit and have time to debrief and to let off some of that steam. It's so important because you don't always have to see a psychologist. If you just sit with somebody, you create a beautiful field between the two of us. And it's very supportive. You don't even have to give advice, but just to sit there and to hold the space with somebody is very important. So during this time, and we're all different personalities, I might be somebody that's not going to be talking, in a public place, but there's somebody else that has that need to speak, and they need somebody to just maybe nurture or comfort them. So you could become quite offensive if you tell them to be positive. I mean, personally, we've had losses, and it was at a time when somebody, was quite offensive towards me and said to me the exact same words, you need to be positive. And I just thought, what, we just lost somebody. Don't tell me to be positive. I am fearful. This virus is killing people. It's not something that I'm fabricating in my mind. I see it all the day. We're working in hospitals. We see the stats. We see people dying. So I think maybe that could help. I don't know if that helps.
And also just a little something for employees and business owners alike, practicing an attitude of gratitude. Being grateful for the little things that you actually have, that haven't been, the fact that you opened your eyes this morning and the sun was shining, that is something to be immensely grateful for. And when you give gratitude for the simple things in life, you actually realize how less complicated the big things are, because you've actually given cognizance to something that is good. And it makes a massive, massive difference. And if you're going to sit in a working environment where you are surrounded by negativity all the time, your productivity decreases. And if your productivity decreases, in 6 months' time, there might not be a business to go to. What is your stress level going to go there? And I mean, I'm not saying turn around and tell people the show must go on. I mean, have a little bit of sympathy and empathy towards it all. But again, we have to remember that, yes, we're living under a dark cloud right now, but it's not all bad. And the minute you give gratitude for the small little things, it just makes a big difference on your outlook.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
So we've dealt with I suffer with anxiety and in some situation as well. Do you actually link in often? And sometimes my anxiety will bring on my depression. But the one thing I want to find out is one thing I'm finding with myself and others is an increase in social anxiety, struggles in different forms of from communicating with each other to even texting, voice notes, phone calls. And you have been discussing panic attacks and things, and that's something I have experienced myself. But what is the kind of thing that we can do? Because especially now being so isolated and it contributing to this intense social anxiety or other anxieties, like you say, fear anxieties based in fear, but some of the other anxieties that people are feeling, how can we deal with that before it gets, because the more anxious I get, the closer I'm getting to a panic attack. It's going to come at some point. So how can we deal with it on that sort of day-to-day basis to try and cope better with your anxieties in order to prevent panic attacks, but also to try and work through what is happening there?
I think the social anxiety aspect is very, very prevalent at the moment, especially now after the lockdown, after we've been ripped out of our comfort zones and we've missed connection. We as human beings are designed to connect. Not all in the same way. Some of us are introverts, some are extroverts, some enjoy big crowds, others, but we are designed to connect. And the moment that's taken away from us, it's a basic need. It's an absolute basic need. And the moment that part of you starts, not dysfunctioning, that's completely the wrong word, but it's a need that is not being fed, you actually start often, and I mean, withdrawal, social withdrawal is one of the big masks of depression. It's one of the big things that often, if it's the only symptom, no one will ever see it as depression. They'll see it as you're weird or you're trying, or you're being, you call it, yeah, you're being reclusive or you're being antisocial, or you're being this or that. But actually, you're withdrawing yourself. It's a major, major mask of depression. Could be that the depression is slightly uncontrolled, but it could also be a trigger from something else. I'm not sure exactly what your scenario is, but it's definitely something that should be, I think, aggressively dealt with, and it's not something that should be neglected and just accepted as is, or this is the way I am, or it's not normal. We made to connect, and we thrive off that, and a very, very big part of our health actually depends on it. How you feel?
Yeah, we actually wired up in such a way to scan the environment for anything that happens socially, whether it is rejection or isolation or withdrawal. And when that happens, our bodies goes into a kind of almost like a panic, and it actually causes inflammation apparently in the body, and it can make you sick. So, now with this pandemic, people have been isolated, and that's what we're seeing also a lot in the practice, is that people have been so isolated, they feel so lonely, and they feel disconnected. And so for some people, that's wonderful. If you are an introvert or you want to be on your own, that's wonderful. I must say I enjoyed some of it. But for other people that need that connection, there's certain personalities, and I don't know if you are familiar with the Enneagram, because I'm also into the Enneagram. There are some of us, we need that connection. And it's not always an unhealthy need, it's a need. And so when you don't get that, you do go into a bit of a panic. And I think also what has happened is that because of the rules, some people have also taken it a bit too far. And they have then neglected those people that they were supposed to keep in contact with. So many of the older people or the people who live alone have been just left and isolated. So your anxieties then become worse because, your mind is running crazy. Am I being abandoned? Am I being rejected? Am I not good enough? So often you need to check in with yourself. What is really happening? Why am I feeling more anxious? And the answers will be there. With anxiety, the more you run, the faster that fear is going to chase you. And no matter how fast you run, it's going to overtake you. And when it overtakes you, it's going to hit you in the face. And that's when you can't breathe and you're going to have your panic attack. So it's best to be brave. We have to be brave and turn and face whatever that fear might be, because therein lies the answer. Okay, because we can teach you social skills, but that's not going to always, it's like putting a band-aid strip on things. You know?
You could probably assist me with this. The idea that came up is, which really worked for me, because although I'm an extrovert introvert, I love my personal space, but I do need that human connection as well.
Yeah.
So what we did is we created a virtual game night where we would, as family and friends, connect virtually on Zoom, and then each one would have a theme every week. If it's creative arts, we could do something like that, or if it's games or whatever. Even though it's virtual, you have that human connection. And it also kind of forces you out of that comfort zone of remaining seclusive. And like you said, it does take bravery. And I saw changes in family members. I saw changes in friends that are totally introverted and also struggle with depression and anxiety. So I don't know, that's just a small idea. We have technology, we use it to connect. Yeah.
That's an amazing idea. Lady in yellow skirt would like to ask this question.
Yes, my question is to Prema, the psychologist. I just need to find out, at which point do you ascertain that April need journey therapy or your normal psychotherapy therapy? And also, when you were talking about the journey thing, you mentioned something that there is a technique that would make you be in touch with your memories, old emotions and stuff. Now it makes me think that, is this therapy more relevant for older people? Do kids benefit from that? Because I can imagine my 7-year-old being traumatized by something else. Now he has to think that, when last did you feel the emotions that you're feeling right now? So I just need you to explain that to me, please.
So let me start with the last part, because that's a part I remember now, and that is working with children. Children are truly amazing. It's easier to work with children than with adults. When I work with an adult, I do a lot of preparation. So I first assess whether, where you are in terms of even spiritually, because it's a body, mind, and spiritual technique. It's not a religious technique. So I want to check where you are and how you feel about the kind of work that I'm doing. And I'm very blessed because I track those kind of people now. So whoever comes to me seems to want to do the work that I do. So with adults, I normally do an assessment. Some people really want to talk. Some people, it seems as if all they do is come to visit me, to offload, and that's okay. That's what they want. But others come for specific things. Many people want a release, and I find in that kind of therapy, you release, real healing takes place because it's based on forgiveness. You release, the memories get released from your nervous system, and you actually feel the relief. So it is quite effective for me in my practice, and I see the clients benefiting. So did I answer the questions for the adults?
Maybe can I think also what I picked up in the question is journey therapy, adult versus a younger person.
Okay.
I think maybe just that difference.
Okay, the children, they work much quicker. So with an adult, when I eventually do the journey, it's going to be at least a 2-hour process. Okay, it's quite intense. It's very deep, but it's very soft and gentle. And it's a lot of work that's going to be done. I'm not doing the work. I'm just going to be facilitating. You are going to be doing the work, and you're going to be doing your own healing. So that is so wonderful. So I don't get involved in all of that. You can speak a foreign language while you're doing the processing. So I don't really have to know everything you say. Obviously, I would like to know, and sometimes I do ask for a bit of a translation. So with adults, it takes longer, and adults like to play mind games. So if you are a mind type person like I am, I don't want to go to the emotion. I do not want to go to my heart. Okay. And also, I don't know what's happening in my body. So you need to, so obviously we need to do that assessment, and the work is done organically. So it's not like a lot of long questionnaires or anything like that. As we work organically, start picking up, okay, this is a mind type person. I need to get you out of your head into your heart and into the emotions, and that's where we're going to go, and the work is going to be done. With children, it's much quicker. A child takes less than 10, 20 minutes with the journey, and they pick up on the memories, they heal themselves.
It's like a game to them.
It's a game to them. With an adult, if I say, close your eyes and can you see the stairs? 10, 9, 8. I have to really go slow. With a child, I'll say 10, 9, and he'll say, I'm already downstairs. Okay. And he doesn't even keep his eyes closed. So with children, it's so much easier, so much fun, and they come to forgiveness quite easily. They have the resources, so you don't have to tell them, to fight the bully, you need to be strong. They will come up with the resources. You don't have to say, if you want to concentrate in the classroom or do well, you need to concentrate. They will come up with the resources. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. It works quite easily with children. Obviously not very little children, so I'm not working with little ones.
And with adults as well, it would work for almost every scenario. Now I'm asking because I'm thinking, we used to want to talk, as you're saying, there would be clients who would want to talk. Like for instance, now I just lost my mom now in June, and I can't help but to think that even though she was sick, cancer and stuff, but I think if there was no corona, she would have lived longer. I felt the fact that she got admitted and we couldn't see her, and she got alienated and we couldn't talk to her, and I felt that I've got issues with the medical practitioners. I felt they prioritized corona people than other people. So now, if you would want me to tap into, I think I would find difficulties into applying this kind of technique. And I'm saying, is it like relevant to every scenario?
Okay. So most of the time, we do emotional journey. Okay, so that will be an emotional journey, and I'll do grief therapy with that. And I do a lot of grief therapy. And that is the most beautiful work to do. I'm really, so humbled to be sitting in that beautiful space with somebody when you do grief work. Okay, and you'll get all your answers, because it's you that will find the answers. You will sit with a spiritual mentor, which will either be your ancestor, or it could be God or Jesus or Allah or Jehovah. And you will really come to peace. In every process with grief work, I find it's the most beautiful process. Okay. So with that, we don't really have to go to a memory. Okay. Because you're coming with a trauma that just happened recently. So there's no point in going to something that happened when you were 6 years old. But if that does come up, then that's obviously what we need to work on.
Awesome, thank you. We've got one last question in the back. I'm limiting to last question purely for the sake of time. Stephen.
Earlier, you guys mentioned that the body carries a wisdom. And I just wanted to know, to access that wisdom that your body stores and has, do you do that purely by memory, or how do you get to trust that wisdom? If you guys can just elaborate on that, because I found that very interesting.
Good luck.
So You know, I've attended many spiritual workshops and self-awareness workshops and life transformation workshops, and you start learning how to get in touch with source. And you all know what source in Afrikaans. I love the Afrikaans word. I always like to say, get in touch with the oorsprong, where we come from and where we go to. And when you get in touch with that, then you're in a space where you feel that, yeah, I can conquer anything. And also because you're in a spiritual space, and if you have a mentor, you know, you're supported by that mentor, you know, and you become so courageous because you get all that wisdom from the mentor. Your body will give you all the answers because the body will give you advice, you know, and so it's a truly amazing space to find yourself in. And never doubt that process because it's a really magical space to be in. And we want you to experience that. And you've all had that experience, you know, those moments when you were maybe meditating or praying where you felt that connection with the divine. The way to go now is to become aware of that. And the idea is to raise your consciousness so that you become more aware of how to develop that, you know, and that's why, you know, people have been so into meditation before, and now it's the whole mindfulness thing. And the whole idea is to, you know, become more mindful so that in every moment you become aware of what's really happening here, you know, become aware of that. And so that body wisdom, your body knows everything and it will give you the answers. But it's a combination, you know, I don't like to take things out of context. Did that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Well, thank you, ladies. I would just like to close off with one thing, in that we actually have mutual friends that they've both had an element of trauma at one point or another in their lives. And they make a point of every 6 months going for a mental health check-in. They're just going to have an hour-long conversation with someone, just check that they're okay. And it actually just brings them back to where they are. They know they're okay. And, well, at surface level, I suppose, in conversation, they seem like they live such well-balanced, healthy, solid lives. There's no shame in going to say to somebody, I just want to come and have a conversation with you for an hour. I just want to check in on how I'm doing. And if something comes up in that session, you have the opportunity to then address it. You'll have somebody that will teach you the tools or the coping mechanisms. So just let's all encourage good mental health. And Marika, just one last thing. Given that it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, could you please give us a little demo of how you do yourself breast exam?
Okay, so I'm very, very passionate about breasts to start off with.
We're recording this. We're recording this.
But, I always tell my patients it's quite difficult for me to do a breast exam on someone else because I don't know what your breasts feel like. And the best way to do a breast exam is your own one, because a lot of patients will always come in and say, doctor, just feel my breast if there's anything to be worried about. You'll know when there's something to be worried about, but you'll only know if you actually feel. So basically, it's not rocket science. So it depends obviously on what size you are, because that makes a very, very big difference in how accurately you will feel for lumps or for any non-benign lesions. Basically, rule of thumb is basically just to start around, what am I doing? Just this is all planning, there's nothing. So you basically just feel in the 4 different, your breast is divided into 4 quadrants, so you feel in the different quadrants. You'll know when there's something wrong, but I know some ladies, or many, many, many young ladies of childbearing age have, lumps. They have fibrocystic breasts,
So especially, but when a lump correlates with your cycle during the certain time of month, just before you start menstruating, start getting your period, you get lumps. Those are usually, and if they're tender, and that's a very big misconception. If they're tender, that's good. You want it to be tender. Cancer isn't tender. So the moment you have a lump that's uncomfortable and a little bit sore, it's usually fine. And especially when the lump is fixed, if you can't move it around. If the lump is able to move around, that's also a good sign. The moment it becomes fixed, it points more towards a non-benign lesion. But basically, just feel yourself up, ladies. And then your mammograms. Especially if they have a family history, sisters, mother, even on your dad's side, anyone with a family history of breast cancer, rather more often than not, and especially after the age of 50.
Thank you very much. Carla, where are we now? Okay, it's your turn now.
No, because you are one of the thank yous. Although my battery is quite low, so I'm just going to plug it in.
While Carla is finding her charger, I hope that you ladies enjoyed the session and found it very informative, and you learned some tricks and tips, and you found yourself a new GP, a new therapist, and a new craniosacral therapist. That's a new word for me. Thank you, Linda, for teaching me something new for today. So I encourage you all to have a little mingle and a networking session once we finish with all the formalities. But if I can, please ask that we try and leave the premises as close to 8:30 as possible, COVID protocols and all. Over to you. Oh, we have to send it out.
Where's the clicker? Yeah. I love the clicker. Oh,
no,
okay. So we'd like to give a special thank you to our amazing panel, to Prema, to Marika, to Linda, and to Michelle, our FMB Superwoman, who was also our Oprah standing tonight. Hopefully, once we get some financial sponsors, we will be able to have something special underneath your chairs next time.
Today's not that
day. And we also want to say thank you to If You Only Knew Apparel for our awesome branded t-shirts. So if you don't mind standing up, Danielle, so that you can also just say thank you. A lot of our t-shirts, and then also a big thank you to our exhibitors, Asha Raja from Sparkle Gifts and Land Crates, Christine Taylor from Upvisor, Alicia Potfitter from Body Retention Training in Sandwich Park. Sorry about I think I need a lot of focus assessment there. I think she's giving one away today. And then also Fatma Tizula from Back to My Roots, and then I don't know if Bertha from Be Leather came today or not, but she was on the list. But yeah, we just wanted to thank our exhibitors as well. From now on, we will be having people displaying their wares or their services at every one of our events, because we are here to empower future females. And so yeah. Just no food, please. Don't bring any edibles. You can bring photos of your edibles, but don't bring any food in yet. And then also a big thank you to you for actually being here and taking the chance of being out here with us. And I'm very, very grateful for you joining us. At the moment, I'm the only Future Female Ambassador here, but I do have two co-ambassadors, Annika and Siobhan, who unfortunately could not make it tonight. So I was kind of womaning it myself with my superwoman here as well, and the other superwoman, Tracy. Tracy, sorry. I keep on calling you sometimes. I call you Roxanne because your name is Roxanne, and then Michelle is like, who's Roxanne? So sorry, Stacy. So but thank you to each and every one of you that's here tonight, and for joining us, especially for our first COVID hybrid event.
we know that the technology was not the greatest. We thought we were going to be a team of 3 at least to be able to handle that. And I think everything considered, we actually did all right. I think the in-house, the in-person event was great. For me, it was perfect. It was one of the best that we've ever had, especially with our panelists and with our audience and the questions being asked and just the general energy and the vibe. And then for the viewers on Zoom, next time it's going to be better. We're going to build on our hybrid events as well. And then also, I really probably can hear me through my mask because I've been talking through the whole time now, and I'm thinking, is that the plan that we actually have with Future Females, we will be sending it through to you on email as well as a post-event emailer, is that we've had this session now with Mind, Body, Soul to prepare us because we are female entrepreneurs and we have all gone through this COVID period, the lockdown period. So now it's time to get back to our mind, our body, our soul, our spirit. Then on 26th of November, we're going to have Annette Lovell speaking to us about owning your brand. So then we can go back to our businesses and take our businesses back, because now we first have to go and do some homework. And I can see from all 3 of our panelists, there's a lot of things to digest and things that we need to think about and perhaps do before we can get to the next step. And then in December, we're going to have our end of year celebration where we envisage celebrating the female entrepreneurs who made it through COVID, the ones who started up in COVID and made it through COVID, and then also to encourage those who might have failed, but in Future Females, we always say you fail up. Everything is an experiment, everything is trying something new. So that is what our plan is for the end of this year, and then we'll let you know about next year. But we've got big plans for Future Females for Elizabeth. We also have we're going to have a weekly online networking session as well, but you get all of that information on your email. I'm not going to bore you with that now. I'm going to rather give you time to network a bit more and see if there's some more biscuits outside. If they're allowed to have. Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to hand it over to Michelle. That's for the final thank you from FNB, since they are our sponsors. Speak from the heart.
Well, thank you again for being here tonight, and it's awesome to host all you ladies here and have entrepreneurs in our midst. It's something that we pride ourselves on, and we've got our own niche of women in business as a sector that we try and support. And if there is anything banking related that you would like to find out, or we can assist you with opening of a new business account or anything like that, Stacey's your lady. She does all our account openings. I'm a business manager. If there's anything you would like to know relating to existing businesses, please feel free to connect with us. Thank you for joining us tonight.
That's it. Let's put on the mood music. For the speakers, that is something that we do now. So each displayer is going to give each of our speakers a gift. So I know that Asha has something special for Michelle. Oh. Yes. Also because it's Michelle's birthday. I've got a party. Thank you, Asha. I do. I'll relate to you. Thank you. This is so awesome. Thank you. Great. And then for the other 3 gifts that we have, I know that Alicia is such a you were locked out.
Yeah, so I was sneaking over a call on that side, and as I properly tried to sneak back in, someone had locked the door. So I have been listening to the great acoustics right outside the door. No, we were online.
You're still online. Okay, so
I know that Alicia as well, and also she's offering one of our speakers a focus assessment. And yes, and then we've got Fatma also with a gift, and Christine Tarek with a gift for one of our speakers. So you can at random decide who's going to get what. Go, ready, rush.
Go, Christine, go.
Thank you very much. What's up here? Oh, yeah, we have to gift exchange.
Yes, nice. So they're not able to store as such, right? As people, I would rather do the real thing.
Myself also, I really
When did you publish? And this is this year. Just before
Wait back 2 seconds. All 30 coming off. Now it's close up. I know COVID, but just a smidge closer.
answer very well because I said I would get
I don't want to tell, but I need
Yes. Yes, yes. I'm trying to check out what it is. This is not the How do you know time? Okay, stop recording and then you can.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. You're so good. There was so many other things that I was supposed to say. Talk about the yoga nidra and the yoga, all the techniques. I knew I wasn't and I also don't want to harm the no, it was okay.
No, you didn't mean like that.
I hope so.
No, really.
My parents were able to watch because the mother kind of here, and I think they were having trouble because Tish wasn't there and Rami went to her. So maybe he did go to see.
Oh, okay.
I don't know because I did tell her.
Oh.
Networking.
Yeah. But she